Tonight, when you finally lie down to sleep, you will expect one thing. You will expect to close your eyes, drift off, and stay asleep in one long, unbroken block until morning, 8 hours, straight through. That is what a good night's sleep is supposed to look like. And if you wake up in the middle of the night at 2 or 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, unable to drift back off, you will probably feel a flicker of anxiety. Something is wrong. My sleep is broken. Why can't I just sleep through the night like I'm supposed to? But here is the strange and liberating truth. For most of human history, almost no one slept through the entire night. Not because they were sick or stressed or doing something wrong, but because human beings were never designed to sleep that way in the first place. The idea that a normal night's sleep is one solid, uninterrupted 8-hour block is surprisingly recent. And when you look at how your ancestors actually slept and why, you discover something that might completely change how you feel about waking up in the dark. That moment at 3 in the morning, the one that fills so many people with worry, may be one of the most natural and ancient things your body can do. To understand this, we have to go back, long before alarm clocks, before electric light, before bedrooms as we know them. And we have to start with a historian who noticed something hiding in plain sight, scattered across centuries of old documents. The historian's name is Roger E. Kirsch, and in the late 1990s, while researching the history of nighttime, he stumbled onto a mystery. As he read through diaries, court records, medical books, poems, and letters from the pre-industrial world, he kept encountering strange, casual references to something called first sleep. People wrote about waking after their first sleep. They described things they did between their first sleep and their second sleep. These phrases appeared over and over in different countries and different languages, always used matter-of-factly, as though everyone simply knew what they meant. And Kirch slowly realized he was looking at the fingerprints of a completely different way of sleeping, one that had been so normal, so universal, that no one bothered to explain it, and which had since been almost entirely forgotten. What E. Kirch had discovered is now often called segmented sleep, or biphasic sleep, and the picture that emerged from his research was remarkable. For much of history, people did not go to bed and sleep straight through. Instead, they went to sleep not long after dark and slept for a few hours. This was the first sleep. Then, somewhere around midnight or the early hours of the morning, they woke up naturally, and they stayed awake for 1 hour, sometimes 2 or 3. This waking period in the middle of the night was not a problem. It was not insomnia. It was an ordinary, expected part of the night. And then, after this quiet interval, they would go back to sleep for a second stretch, the second sleep, until morning. So the question becomes, what on earth did people do during this strange window of wakefulness in the deep middle of the night? And the answer is, quietly, almost everything. E. Kirch found that people used this time in the most ordinary and human ways imaginable. They would lie in bed and think. They would reflect on their dreams, which were fresh in their minds from the first sleep. They would pray. They would talk quietly with whoever was lying beside them. Some got up to tend the fire, to check on animals, or to use the bathroom. Some visited neighbors. Others simply rested in the dark, in a calm, meditative, half-waking state. There were even medical and household manuals from the period that gave advice on what to do during this interval. It was, in every sense, a normal and accepted part of the daily rhythm of life. Now, this raises a huge and fascinating question. Was this just a cultural habit, a European quirk of the pre-industrial world, or does it point to something deeper, something built into human biology itself? And here the story becomes even more compelling, because there is scientific evidence that segmented sleep may be, in some sense, our natural default, and that the way we sleep today is the thing that is unusual. In the early 1990s, a psychiatrist and sleep researcher named Thomas Wehr conducted an experiment that has become famous in the study of sleep. Wehr wanted to know what would happen to human sleep if you removed the single most powerful modern influence on it: artificial light. In the modern world, we are bathed in light late into the evening, from lamps, screens, televisions, and phones. This light suppresses melatonin and pushes our natural sleep timing later and later. So Wehr took a group of people and placed them in an environment that mimicked ancient conditions. For several weeks, they were given 14 hours of darkness every night, the kind of long, dark night that our ancestors would have experienced in winter, with no artificial light at all. At first, the participants slept in long stretches, catching up on what was likely a large accumulated sleep debt from modern life. But then, after a few weeks, something extraordinary happened. Their sleep began to reorganize itself. They stopped sleeping in one solid block. Instead, they naturally settled into a pattern of sleeping for a few hours, then waking for a period of 1 to 3 hours in the middle of the night, and then sleeping again until morning. Without being told to, without any historical knowledge of first sleep and second sleep, their bodies had spontaneously fallen into exactly the segmented pattern that E. Kirch had found in those old documents. The ancient rhythm had re-emerged, all on its own, simply by removing artificial light and restoring long, natural darkness. But the most beautiful part of Wehr's findings was not just the sleep pattern itself. It was what happened during that waking period in the middle of the night. When Wehr studied the hormones of his participants during this quiet interval, he found something striking. Their bodies showed elevated levels of prolactin, a hormone associated with feelings of calm and contentment, the same hormone released during states of deep relaxation. The people in the study described this middle-of-the-night waking period not as distressing, but as peaceful, a state of quiet, restful, meditative wakefulness, unlike anything they normally experienced in their busy modern lives. In other words, this was not broken sleep. It was a distinct and possibly precious state of consciousness, one that most modern humans have completely lost. So if this segmented pattern is so natural, so deeply rooted in our biology, the next question is obvious. What happened? Why do we now sleep, or try to sleep, in one long, unbroken block? Why did we forget the first sleep and the second sleep? And the answer, as with so many things about modern life, comes down largely to one revolutionary invention: light. For almost all of human history, the night was genuinely dark. Once the sun went down, the world was lit only by fire, by candles, by the moon and stars. Artificial light was expensive, dim, and limited. There was very little to do after dark, so people went to sleep relatively early, and the long night gave ample time for two separate sleeps with a natural waking period between them. But then came a transformation. As artificial lighting improved, first with better lamps, then with gas lighting, and finally, decisively, with the electric light bulb, the night was pushed back. Suddenly, the evening could be extended for hours. People stayed up later and later. Social life, work, and entertainment spilled into the hours that had once belonged to darkness and sleep. As bedtimes grew later, the long night compressed. There was no longer enough time in the dark for two separate sleeps. The natural waking period got squeezed out. And as the practice of segmented sleep faded, so did the very memory of it. Within a few generations, people forgot that humans had ever slept any other way. The single consolidated block of sleep became the new normal, the new expectation, the thing we now call a good night's sleep. And the ancient rhythm, along with its peaceful midnight interval, slipped almost entirely from human memory. But your body did not forget. Your biology was shaped over hundreds of thousands of years, and it does not update itself in a century or two of electric light. And this is where the story circles back to you, lying awake at 3 in the morning, feeling that flicker of anxiety. Because for many people, that middle-of-the-night waking may not be a sleep disorder at all. It may be an echo, a resurfacing of the ancient, natural, segmented rhythm that is still written deep into your biology, trying to express itself even in a world flooded with artificial light. This does not mean that all sleep problems are secretly ancient blessings. Insomnia is real, and it can be genuinely distressing and harmful. If you lie awake for hours filled with racing thoughts and anxiety, unable to rest, that is a real problem worth addressing. But here is the crucial and liberating insight that comes from understanding our history. A great deal of the distress people feel about waking in the night comes not from the waking itself, but from the belief that it is wrong, from the anxiety, the frustration, the certainty that something has broken. And that anxiety is often the very thing that keeps them awake. Imagine instead that you wake at 3 in the morning and you do not panic. You do not check the clock with dread. You do not lie there calculating how few hours of sleep you will get. Instead, you remember that this waking is ancient, natural, something your ancestors did every single night for thousands of years. You let yourself rest in the quiet. You breathe. You allow your mind to drift, calm and unhurried, knowing that sleep will return, just as it always did for the people who came before you. For many, simply reframing that waking moment, understanding it as natural rather than broken, is enough to drain away the anxiety and often to let sleep return far more easily. There is something profound in this. We tend to assume that the way we live now is the way humans have always lived, that our patterns are the natural ones, and the past was strange. But sleep reveals the opposite. It is our modern, consolidated, 8-hour block, pursued under artificial light and enforced by alarm clocks, that is the historical oddity. The segmented night, with its peaceful waking interval, is the older, deeper, more human pattern. And it is still there inside you, waiting beneath the surface, ready to re-emerge the moment the conditions are right. So tonight, as you lie down to sleep, consider what you now know. If you wake in the deep middle of the night, in the quiet and the dark, you are not malfunctioning. You are not broken. You are, in that moment, doing something profoundly ancient. You are keeping a kind of vigil that your ancestors kept for countless generations, in caves and cottages and fire-lit rooms across every corner of the world. That quiet hour in the dark was once a time for dreaming, for thinking, for praying, for love, for simply being awake in the stillness of the night. It belonged to your ancestors, and in some small, deep biological way, it still belongs to you. The next time you find yourself awake at 3 in the morning, do not reach immediately for your phone and do not fill with worry. Instead, lie still for a moment and listen to the silence, and know that you are participating in one of the oldest human experiences there is. The first sleep is behind you. The second sleep is still to come, and you are exactly where your ancestors would have been, awake in the quiet heart of the night and perfectly, naturally human. If this changed how you think about waking up in the night, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below and tell me which part surprised you most. And if you want more of this, subscribe to Simply Odd. A new video drops every week. The next one might explain something you have wondered about your whole life without ever knowing what to ask.